So I think a challenge for us as leaders is to think about, have our teachers got these things? Have the colleagues that I'm working with got these? And if they haven't, how might I assist them to build those particular capabilities that they might need? Generalised pedagogical knowledge, we've done a lot on the principles of learning and teaching. They capture generalised pedagogical knowledge, but POLT isn't enough on its own. If I'm doing literacy, what is the knowledge I have to have about literacy learning? What kids get right, what they get wrong, what does development look like, and then how do I teach it? And then sitting beyond that is really learning theory. But I'm just going to stop for a minute, just give you a chance not to listen for a minute, and just, does that capture for you some of the things teachers need, and where do you think your colleagues are up to with some of those? I think there are all sorts of conversations that we can actually have at the school level around this, and one of them, I guess, if we're looking at learning theory at the top, would be even a conversation at the school about, well, what is learning? What's our collective view at the school of what is learning? What's our definition? How do we know if kids have learnt something or not? It's a good starting point, I think, often for a conversation. That's what we're in the business of, learning, but what do we mean by it? I'll just put up a definition that's fairly reasonably accepted across the board. So a change in behaviour or the capacity to behave in a given fashion. Most people would argue you haven't learnt something unless you have changed your behaviour, or unless you're able to behave in a different way from what you were before. If what you've gone through has had no impact at all on your behaviour, you can't really say someone has learnt something. The second point is that it's enduring, that I don't lose it after the end of a lesson, or after the end of 10 minutes, or after the end of a week. There's something about learning that, in fact, it is something that I have changed something within myself that has enabled this changed behaviour or capacity. And lastly, that it actually does result from practice or other forms of experience. And again, I want to underline here the idea of practice, because nearly everyone, to learn something effectively, needs to practice it. For a teacher to teach something once and expect kids to have learnt it, for you as learners to hear something once and retain it is almost impossible. So it is something about that practice, the reinforcement, the coming back, the really strengthening the connections, which is critical. And from practice or other forms of experience, which actually could be modelling on watching someone. And there's a lot of learning that actually happens from watching. You've only got to watch, I think, some young kids, or you've only got to watch yourself sometimes and think, oh my God, my mother would have said that, or whatever. It's interesting, I think, as you get older, you sort of watch all these traits in yourself and think, oh, snap, you know, there it is. Whether in yourself or your partners, I can watch my partner and think, oh my God, that's your dad, you know, so long ago. So it's not only the practice, it is that other influences that we actually come across. So most people agree pretty much on the definition. Where there's a bit of disagreement is then on learning theory. What actually causes this learning to happen? And I won't go through all of this, but basically there's a couple of major theories. And I guess I'm going to zoom through these really quickly, but I'd argue that we need to know them as educators. So there's behavioural theories, first of all, which I'll go through in a minute. And then there's cognitive theories for what is actually, and this is about explaining learning, it's not about instruction, but these are the theories to inform the sorts of instruction that we might actually be involved in.